Well, with the end of the MLS regular season, it's that time of the year again where I made a video reacting to my prediction that I made in the beginning of the year. And we, of course, will be starting off with the Eastern Conference. And then in the next video, I'll talk about the Western Conference and react to the prediction that I made. And, I've said this before, and I've always kind of just said that, I have always been terrible in terms of prediction. And I think in the past couple of years, in some way, as bad as I was in prediction, I actually got right on a lot of them, or at least close to be getting right in terms of some of these teams that I predict where they're going to finish in the beginning year, and that actually turns out to be true. This year, though, I don't think that's the case, because this year, boy oh boy, when I look back at making some of these predictions, yeah, I won't be surprised. I might have got all of them wrong because of how crazy this season turned, and there was definitely some surprises this season and teams that everybody thought that maybe would do well, and they turns out to be pretty terrible. And that pretty much leads us to talk about the first team, which is the Columbus Crew. And don't lie, but I'm pretty sure everybody, including yourself, that made a prediction of the MLS standing predicted that the Columbus Crew was going to finish first place, and there's no denying that obviously did not happen. That of course, is something that not only is completely wrong, but the Columbus Crew actually finished ninth in the Eastern Conference. I mean, they were a team that, I understand why a lot of people predict them as the best team in the league. I mean, I said in the beginning of the year, with the depth that they have and also the talent that they have, there is no doubt that it seems like they could be on course of repeating again. But unfortunately, that thing called MLS Cup hangover, and it seems like maybe that problem that Caleb Porter team has with the Timbers, where the very next season they missed the playoffs because of the MLS Cup hangover. Yeah, he basically brought it to the Columbus Crew, and it's not just the MLS hangover or the MLS Cup hangover that kind of bothered this team, but the numerous injuries of this team, and that, this team, maybe in the end, they might not as deep as we thought they first were. And, with all those injuries, and not to mention also the back line completely regressing this year, despite the fact that the back line, the injury front there isn't really as bad as it is if you compare in the midfield and also on the attack. But yeah, I mean, in the end, they basically finished in a place that nobody thought that was going to be possible at the end of the season, which is missing out on the playoffs. And again, don't lie, you basically are one that basically predicted that they're going to finish first, just like myself. And I think we can all agree that one was absolutely wrong. But now moving on to Orlando City, who I predicted that they're going to finish second in the Eastern Conference. And for a while, they were actually at this spot. I mean, they were looking like they was going to finish in the top four of the Eastern Conference standing. But then remember that stretch where they had that murderous one where they play against some of the best team in the league, and they basically did not win a single game during that stretch, and they go for a bit of a free fall and end up finishing in sixth in the Eastern Conference because of that. And yeah, I mean, this year there's no doubt that Orlando did kind of regress a little bit, and part of that has to do with injuries wise. But I think one thing that has regressed on this team is definitely the goal scoring for this team. Now, that being said, they are starting to figuring some things out, and with the way that it seems like most likely they're going to get Nani back in the playoffs, and Daryl DK now started to score the goals again. Maybe this Orlando City team can figure out in terms of the attack, but for most of the year, they were really struggling in that department. And it's kind of shocking that of course, was the case, because when you look at this attack, this is one of the most talented attack in the league, and yet at times they can only score like one goal or two goals every single game. So, and then of course, when they do play against those good team, especially down the stretch, they just crumble. And this is where I also kind of just question the legitimacy of Orlando City, of the fact that you can't beat the best team in the league. Yeah, you're not going to go really far in the playoffs, because those teams that you're meeting in the playoffs, yeah, those are going to be the same team that you're probably going to have to face, especially as you get deeper into the playoffs. Now moving on to Atlanta United, who, this season I thought Atlanta was going to have a season where they're going to start look like the Atlanta United of the old, because of all these signings that they made in the offseason. And it turns out that wasn't really the case, though. Gonzalo Pineda and ever since Gabriel Hines, they've fire. They kind of ride the ship a little bit, but in the end, they did finish fifth in the Eastern Conference, and they actually had chances to finish higher than that. I mean, when they went on that second half resurgent and finally when some of the players that they desperately need to be good started to do well, they started to make a run, and it looks like here we go. This is when Atlanta is really started to make a run to be a decent team. But now they kind of started at the end of it. I mean, heading into the playoffs, I will never question in terms of Atlanta, in terms of how they will do in the playoffs, because we know that this team has experience in the playoffs, and they definitely have experience to go deep into it. But down the stretch, there were times where they kind of show some image of the old Atlanta United, or the Atlanta United from the beginning, where it was just a miserable team. I mean, them getting rid of Gabriel Heinze. First I thought maybe that was kind of a little bit too early to do so, but I guess they decided to do it because they want to rescue their season, and boy, they have definitely rescued their season, and that they have been able to get themselves back to a respected place, and I'm very interested to see this team heading into the playoffs. Now, in fourth place, I said the Philadelphia Union was going to finish fourth in the Eastern Conference, and in the end, they finished second in the Eastern Conference. And I thought this was going to be a regress here, because knowing how much the Union kind of sold a lot of their best player last season from the Supporters Shield team, selling Brandon Aronson and Mark McKenzie, I thought it was going to be tough to recover that, but they kind of did very well. And especially, we talk about this homegrown talent and that homegrown pipeline that the Philadelphia Union has. Yeah, it is the real deal. I mean, there is definitely some incredible homegrown talent player coming out of that pipeline that's going to be stars as soon as next season. And then, for the Union, what's incredible about them is the fact that they kind of ride the ship down the latter part of the season. I mean, remember that there was that one point of the season when the Union was in ninth place in the Eastern Conference, and then they got knocked out by Club America, and how that looked like it was doom and gloom for this team, knowing past CCL team past MLS team that goes to CCL, and especially the last team standing, they usually crumble at the end. But instead, this team did the opposite. They just thrive on that and have really recovered themselves to be a team, to be a force to be reckoned with in the Eastern Conference, and ends up finishing second in the East. But now, moving on to fifth place, and I said the New England Revolution was going to finish that position, and in the end, they went on to win the Supporters Shield. And, I talk about how for the Revs, I know there were a lot of people that predicted that the Revs were finished first, and I'm pretty sure for those that actually did predict the Revs first, congratulations, your prediction was definitely correct. But for me, the reason why I didn't want to put them in first is because there was that question of the fact that, when you look at this attack from last season, one of the big problems for this attack last season was that they just had problems in terms of finishing chances, and who knew this season that not only they resolved that problem, but my oh my, that front three with Gustavo Bol, Carlos Gil, and Adam Buxall, that is the deadliest front three in this league that have really just run riot in the Eastern Conference. And I even forgot to mention Tajon Buchanan too, because I talk about those three players that usually gets the attention, but I definitely haven't forgot about Tajon Buchanan, that has really developed to be one of the most talented player in MLS, and a guy that he's definitely going to get that big money move off to Europe this off season. But yeah, the Revs, there's no doubt that this season, I think Revs fan kind of envisioned the fact that this team was going to take the next step. And last year, in some way they kind of overachieve a little bit with the way that they made it to the conference final. And I thought this season, eventually, they're going to maybe achieve good things again, but definitely not in a million years. I thought that this team would be finishing in the Supporters Shield standings, and actually has the most points ever by an MLS team. And again, that's a lot of credit to this New England team, and a lot of credit to Bruce Arena, that he's shown that he still got that magic. Like Bruce Arena, I don't think anyone is going to question the fact that he is perhaps the greatest head coach ever to coach this league, and he is trying to once again win another MLS Cup, which I think would be like 6 MLS Cup that he has won in his career. But this one I think could be much more sweeter because of the way that he is able to take a team that has been just this team has just been a curse in terms of winning MLS Cup, and that this year they feel like this might be finally the year that they finally end that curse and finally win their first MLS Cup after of potentially trying it for the sixth time this season. But now moving on to Toronto FC, who I thought they were going to finish sixth, and this also was one of my terrible prediction that I made. Though I will say that, with TFC, I did say that, the issue I had with TFC is the fact that, actually they didn't finish 12th, they actually finished 13th. Looking at the standings again there. But for TFC, I did say the fact that, my concern with this team is the fact that they are a team that not only does not have a lot of depth, but once some of their star player goes out, this team is going to be a very, this team could be in serious trouble because it's a very hollow kind of team. And not only the fact that that prediction was correct because everybody decided to go on the IR, including some of their most star-studded player. But yeah, I mean, though once you have those kind of player out and that they don't really have a lot of good depth players and a lot of those young players from their either from their academy or players that is kind of just getting into this league, and yeah, you knew that they were probably gonna do badly, but I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it is. I mean, people forget in the beginning of the season it was kind of promising for this team. Well, at least in the CONCACAF Champions League, where it looked promising with the way that they pull off a big upset against Club Leon and move on to the next round against Cruz Azul, where they were basically playing a TFC2 team. But, I think the other issue with this team this season is the fact that, when they did try to hire Chris Armas and trying to use the same system that he did with the Red Bulls and trying to implement it this team, and it turns out it just did not work whatsoever. And then they went through that whole stretch where instead of them maybe finding a new head coach, they kind of just went with an interim head coach. And sometimes when you just go with an interim head coach, sometimes it could work out. I mean, just as Vancouver and Benny Sartini of how he's been doing and working his magic with that team, and also maybe even as RSL and Pablo Mastroeni of what he has done to that team. But for this one team, that's just have not been the case. And yeah, they are a team that is facing some serious question heading into the off season, and especially who exactly is going to be the next head coach of this team. Now, in 7th place, I thought NYCFC was going to finish there, and it turns out they finished in 5th place. And the thing about NYCFC that I kind of question coming into this season is that they were kind of almost similar to TFC, where they just do not have a lot of depth. Now, of course, this is why making prediction in MLS is very tough, because eventually teams, when they throughout the season, they can always add to their roster, and there's no doubt that this NYCFC team did add a lot of players, especially during the summer transfer window, to get themselves to finally have some quality player. But back then when I made this prediction, I didn't think that was going to be the case, because they were just really quiet and just kind of eerily quiet during the transfer window, making no signings whatsoever. And I thought this was going to be a year where I think they still have enough talent to make it to the playoffs, but they're just going to barely make it. And in the end, in some way down the stretch, it looked like that was going to be the case. It looks like it, not because of the fact that they have a very shallow kind of squad, but the fact that they were clearly underachieving, and that this looked like it was going to be a disastrous season for NYCFC. But fortunately for them, they kind of eventually picked themselves up down the stretch, and not to mention the fact that when they finally ended that goal drought, they finally start to realize that they know that they're better than what they are right now, and they were clearly underachieving. They just did enough to now get themselves back above the red line and finish in 5th place in the Eastern Conference. But now moving on to 8th place, where I thought the Chicago Fire was going to finish, and in the end it finished in 12th place. And this has got to be very disappointing to see how the Chicago Fire kind of gone backwards this season. Like, what I predicted this season with them just barely missing the playoffs is because I still think they might missing a couple of more pieces that they can maybe add in the summer transfer to finally get themselves above the red line. But instead, that was not the case. Instead, pretty much all the moves that they made in the offseason turns out to be a huge bust, and they just kind of underachieved throughout the entire season, and eventually that led to Raphael Wiki getting the axe, and yeah, and they just kind of never recover from that, and finish in a very disappointing season in a year where it seems like they're once again going to try to rebuild again, because when you look at some of the end of season roster move that they already made, it seems like they're blowing up the core that they built a year ago, and once again starting from scratch again. Now in ninth place, I said Nashville was going to finish in that spot, and boy oh boy, I was wrong about that. I mean, I told you, there was a lot of bad prediction I made in the beginning of the year, and this again was the latest one where, you know, the reason why I say Nashville was going to finish ninth is that I thought that maybe they were going to have that sophomore slump. Like, the first year was great, but I didn't think that, you know, will that it be sustainable in terms of that defense, and whether or not if it's going to have a lights out year like they did in the first year. And the answer to that second year is not only a yes, but their attack finally start clicking. And once their attack finally start clicking, you can definitely see that this team is started to become a team that could be an MLS Cup contender. Although, that being said, I did mention the fact that down the stretch they have really started to struggle and started to kind of revert back to that 2020 in the expansion season, where they just have problems in terms of scoring, and just hope that their defense basically bail them out. And their defense so far kind of have bailed them out most of the time, but not because they were able to get wins, but most of the games that they have has been just draws this season. And then in their 10th, I thought the Red Bulls was going to finish in this position. And, you know, the Red Bulls this season, I thought this was probably going to be the end of the playoff streak, because of the way that they feel like they're maybe going through a bit of a rebuild. And, you know, Gerhard Struber just trying to get the ideas of you know, implementing it into this team and hope it works. And it turns out they actually keep the streak alive. Well, I will say that they keep the streak alive, but barely did it, as they finished 7th in the Eastern Conference and made it to the playoffs on the very final day. Though I will say that, you know, at least for half of this season, especially as we get down to the final part of this season, it looked like this prediction was going to be right, because the Red Bulls was really struggling. They were in their 9th and 10th place of the Eastern Conference, and I thought this was going to be one of them that I got right. But little do we know that finally this team started to understand the Gerhard Struber system. They gone on an incredible run to get themselves into playoff contender, and then on the final day they were able to snatch that playoff spot to get themselves into the playoffs. And you know, it's going to be interesting to see how the Red Bulls are going to do in the playoffs. And in some way, you know, I know Red Bulls fans are expecting them to do well, but this season it's been kind of weird in a way where I still think that this was a team that was kind of rebuilt, but somehow in some way they still find their way into the playoffs. And in some way, I think the pressure isn't going to be as much as it was in previous year, where, you know, in previous year Red Bulls fans want their team to go deep into the playoffs, and that's the expectation. But this year, you know, I think that they're probably just happy the fact that they make it to the playoffs, consider how much of a disaster it was for majority of the season of them sitting below the red line. And then in 11th place, I said Inter Miami was going to finish that spot, and look at that. They actually finished 11th. So I actually did not get every single prediction wrong in terms of the actual result. I actually got Inter Miami right. And in some way, I basically got in, not just a prediction right in terms of standings, but what I said in the beginning of the year came true. I mean, I said that Phil Neville was probably not going to do well with this team, and indeed that of course is the case. Now, if there's one prediction I got wrong with Inter Miami, is that I thought Phil Neville was going to get fired this season after the finish, if they finish in the 11th place. But it turns out he's still there, and this is kind of mind-boggling, the fact that he is still there with the way how many coaches have usually get fired when you have expectation to do well this season, as what Inter Miami has in the second year, and they once again woefully they underachieve in terms of that. But I guess maybe having maybe having an owner that is your best friend and kind of your right hand man might have helped you for not getting the sack. But you know, there's no doubt that I think a lot of Inter Miami fans are probably frustrated with Phil Neville, and I even heard a lot of them were demanding him fire throughout this season, and rightfully so, because again, this team, you know, this is a really confusing team, because on paper I can definitely see that there's talent, but it just feels like a very weirdly kind of constructed squad that, I just don't know if it's gonna be good enough to make it to the playoffs. Even there is talented player that can make that impact, and unsurprisingly, when you feel a very weirdly meshed squad that doesn't have a lot of chemistry together, they finish in the position that they were. And then in 12th place, I said FC Cincinnati was going to finish in that spot, and I was hoping maybe this is the year that FC Cincinnati was going to make some progress, and in the end, no. They finished dead last again. Again, I feel bad to have to once again put them finishing dead last and winning the wooden spoon. And I'm pretty sure Cincinnati fans are kind of fed up with this too, because I've heard multiple stories this season that, well, I have heard story last year that they were trying to send a message to the front office by sending the wooden spoon. This year they actually tried to not only do it, but they actually tried to at one point bring some wooden spoon into the stadium, and I think maybe the stadium staff did not like that idea, so they immediately confiscated him. So it's almost like they knew that what the supporters was trying to do, and they're having none of it. But at the end of the day, it's just part of the frustration of this team, where when you look on this team, there is talent on this team, and there is some good foundation piece, but they just never really kind of get gelled together. And when you also look at this team this year, I mean, this might sound crazy, but I feel like this year version of FC Cincinnati was probably better than the first 2 year. And I know at the end the result doesn't show it, but when you look at how they play throughout this season, they just look much better than the first 2 year, where in the first 2 year you just never give them a chance because of how bad they were game at their game. But this season, there was just multiple games where they're good enough to win games, but in some way they always find a way to kind of lose games and find the most heartbreaking and frustrating ways to lose game this season, and hence that's why the points total basically show what they are. Even though on paper, when you look at this team, I mean, again, it's crazy to say, but I think this team is probably the best FC Cincinnati team we have seen, it, or the best version of FC Cincinnati in their three years in this league. And it's going to be interesting now, in this off season, where again I think they're going to try to blow it up again and hope that the fourth try will work out, especially now with a new GM and Chris Albright to guide them. But again, it's such a disappointment to see that this was supposed to be a year where they were going to maybe start to make some progress, and now it seems like they're back to where they were back in year one. And then in 13th, I said DC United was going to finish in that position, and I did get this prediction wrong, but in the end they didn't make it to the playoffs. So in some way I will say that kind of got the prediction half right, because the teams that didn't predict it to make it to the playoffs, some of these teams I actually did predict it right, and DC was one of them. Though I will say that I did predict it wrong and underestimate how Hernan Losada team was. Like, I thought this first year, this was kind of similar to what I said with the Red Bulls, where it was going to take time for these DC players to get used to the Hernan Losada system, and it did. I mean, in the beginning of the season, it looked very, very terrible, and it looks like doom and gloom in the beginning of the year. But once they started to get things going, this team was such a fun team to watch, and the team that was destined to look like there could be a playoff contender. Now, unfortunately, unlike where the Red Bulls is, where they were able to get into the playoffs in the final day, that was not the same with this DC team. And for DC, I've said this before in the review, I'm pretty sure with them just missing out by 1 point, they're gonna have a lot of thinking about all the resort that they have this season, and especially some of the losses that they have. That what if they have one of those reserves that doesn't turn into a loss, and if it turns into a win, they make it to the playoffs. And that's usually kind of the thinking when you miss the playoffs just by 1 point. But at the end of the day, I really like what this DC team is going. It's in that I think in the off season, I'm pretty sure Hernan Losada have already demanded the front office that he wants to spend money, and I'm hoping the front office would give him that money to invest in the team, because his system does work well, albeit I know sometimes it could be a little bit of a mess, but if he does bring in the right players to play in the system, this is definitely going to be a playoff contender heading into next season. And then finally, I said Montreal was going to finish 14 in the standings, and in the end, they finished 10th. Though I got the prediction wrong in terms of the fact that I thought Montreal was going to be a doormat team. I thought, with all the question that they have coming into this season, I just don't trust the fact that they were going to get things right, and I was just completely wrong about it. In fact, this team, it's kind of similar to DC, where they really were in playoff contention for most part of the year, and Wilfried Nancy, no doubt, has got the best out of a team that a lot of people thought that they were going to finish that last in the standing, but ultimately, they fall short once again because of the final day. But there's definitely some promise to this Montreal team, and especially if Wilfried Nancy is able to once again get the team that he wants. Because remember, when he came into this team, it was literally the last minute because Thierry Henry decided to step down as the head coach of this team literally just weeks before the season beginning. It was just an absolute mess that Montreal was dealing, and not to mention the fact that there was a lot of backlash with them changing their name to CF Montreal from the Montreal Impact. But with all the chaos and all the unpreparedness, Wilfried Nancy really have done well in his first season with Montreal. And again, I think with now him getting a full off season and him getting a chance to sign the players that he needs to, I think this could be a team that next season could definitely be in that conversation of making the playoffs. But there you have it. That is pretty much it on my reaction in terms of the Eastern Conference prediction I made in the beginning of the season. Let me know in the comments below, and also let me know in the comments below your prediction for the beginning of the year, and talk about how some of them you might have, of course, got absolutely wrong, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people, when they make their prediction, I'm pretty sure nobody, unless you're probably that one person that got all the prediction right in the beginning of the season, because again, there's always going to be time where there's going to be bad prediction that made, and I feel like this season there's no doubt that I made a lot of bad prediction. I think this one was completely wrong. This one was completely wrong. This one was kind of wrong in some way, and then of course this one was completely wrong of what I thought about Nashville. So with that being said, I can't wait to look at the Western Conference version and how much I got wrong in terms of that too. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.